Hello, for anyone who is watching this, thank you for taking a look. I appreciate your time looking at this work in progress version of MCprep and doing any assistive testing. So firstly, you should have been equipped with this URL. If not, you can copy it here. I'll have it in the description below. This is the download link to the work in progress dev version of the add-on 3.0.1. And of course, once you get that, it'll be a direct download and you can install it like normal. So let me just get rid of this, and I will open up user preferences. And I already don't have MCprep installed, so that's good. So I'm going to go to my desktop, see wherever I downloaded it, wherever I did download it, and it should be here. So if I install this guy, you'll then find MCprep. And then obviously the first test is that you enable it and nothing breaks immediately. So there's a lot of new options and settings here, but I'm going to attack this in kind of a workflow setting. So some of the big changes in this version is, again, kind of taking it from a workflow perspective. So this first thing that's new is this world exporter up here. Before I dive into the details of this and everything else that I've added, I just want to make a note that I'm looking for feedback on that things work as I'm showing them, that they work as, without having any errors and on your platform without an issue. And then also I am looking for user experience feedback. So if, for example, you would think that, oh, it'd be really convenient if you did this instead of this, or the way this button or the way you have to click here is awkward, that sort of feedback I am looking for. So do let me know as I'm going through this if you have any ideas like that. And again, there should be a Google form link in the description that allows you to fill out that sort of feedback. So in this workflow, the idea here is that I'm kind of making it very easy to go between exporting your worlds from Minecraft and importing them into Blender. So for example, I have an option where if you use JMC to OBJ, you can actually open JMC to OBJ directly from inside of Blender itself. So obviously you have to set up a configuration path. So if you haven't done that first, when you first open JMC to OBJ, that button, it will actually give you this pop-up saying, hey, do you want to download it? If you don't have it installed, if you click that, it would bring you, as it has here, directly to the download page where you can get it. In my case, I actually already do have it on my machine, so then I can click the second button, which is to open the MCprep preferences. Once I do that, I can actually navigate to this executable path here, and then point it towards where my actual the JMC to OBJ executable is. So it's this one here. I'd press accept, and obviously I'd press save user preferences. So now when I click it, you would find that it actually will open up the program. If you give it a second, my laptop is doing that, and boom, now you actually have the JMC to OBJ has been open. So again, this is part of the workflow. So let's say I wanted to export my world, I'd load it, I'd do the normal stuff, I'd export, whatever it may be, and then I would quit and close out of this. So the next step thereafter would be to actually import the OBJ world. And so again, I can click this. It's a convenience import essentially. It's the same as going to File, Import OBJ, but it's just provided here with the added caveat that there is a default file path provided. So right now if I open it, it just goes to kind of a root location or relative location. But again, if I go back to user preferences, I can actually set a default path for that for my world exports folder. So something I may do, for example, is if I have one folder where I just consistently keep my world saves, which I do, then I can enter that there and save it. And then if I were to actually even just quit and reopen Blender, ignore everything else in my background, if I went here and pressed the world import, it would automatically jump to this folder. So this is already the folder of all my world exports. Again, it's supposed to make it very easy and quick. So maybe I would then choose to import this world. After I do that, again, it's the same as the normal importing. Then it's in my scene, as you would expect. So this is cycles. It happens to be, if I actually kind of just turn this into a sun lamp. So the next couple button clicks are nothing new to MCprep. Obviously, I can select everything and convert it into the right materials. So this pop-up, again, it's now a forced pop-up, providing you to do certain things. So if I press OK here, you'll see that now all the textures work fine in transparency and so forth. But if I actually want it to be in Blender Internal, of course, I could switch and do that this way, and it would switch automatically. Some of the features that was added in was around kind of dealing with the issue if you have multiple imports, import multiple times. So let's say that for whatever reason I want to import, what am I doing? If I want to import another world, I could go to, again, this world thing here, and then say if I did this one, oh, I just realized that was kind of large. So this is going to take a second, but I'm importing, I guess, a mountain range, essentially. So there's going to be duplicative textures. There's going to be duplicate materials after all this. Let's move our mountain range to somewhere not in the middle of everything. Maybe down like there or something, I don't know. Maybe over there, just so it's out of the way. Right, so now we have like a mountain range behind our scene, but by doing that, obviously we now have all these duplicate textures, so there's like .001s everywhere, and then in materials we have duplicate materials all over the place. So, and plus I haven't run the prep materials on this background range yet because we just imported it. So what I can do now is I can select everything, as you've seen here, press prep materials, and if I have the combine materials enabled, when I press this, you'll notice that these users jumped up to be 2 in a lot of the cases. And if I look in here, there should be no used materials that have .00 whatever. So you notice, for example, this red flower, it has a 0 next to it, means that no objects are using this material. So I don't delete it outright, just in case you do want to keep those materials. But essentially, if you were to save this blend file, I'll actually do this. If I save it and then were to reopen it, this is just a way Blender kind of works with purging out unused data blocks. Now all those zeros have disappeared, and so you don't have unnecessary data blocks laying around. You do still have duplicate images. So here you can see we do have .001 images. That's what this other button here is for, combine images. So if I press that, now we can see 112 merged down to 78 images. Now we don't have those duplicate image files, which is great. So if I were ever to import again, or let's say I accidentally did something like that, you don't necessarily have to just prep materials. You could just say combine materials, and you would see that it actually fixes it for me right there. So it consolidates 55 down to 54. So again, this whole workflow should make, sort of material and data block kind of easy stuff to work with. So kind of moving on from there, the next area I guess would be mob spawning. So if I kind of set up a little location here, actually another thing added was the improve UI. So this is, I think, pretty useful. I often do kind of work in this solid mode space, but I know a lot of people don't. So if I click improve UI, it does 2 things. It sets up, it disables bitmaps here, and then it enables, of course, texture solid over here. So if I disable this, I can always just very quickly go back to there using that quick button. Again, it's just a convenience little button there. So maybe the next thing, I said I was going to switch to mobs, so maybe real quick I'll just show the, what's it called, the mesh swapping real quick. Again, I know some people use it, a lot of people don't, that's fine, but at least good to test that it is working for you. So let's say I'm just going to separate out this selection of my scene so I don't process it on the whole thing. And an animation usually wouldn't process on the whole thing, or the whole scene. Let's say I want to convert these into 3D meshes with like animation and all that. So I've selected out some section of the world. It's just this little section here. I didn't really put much care into what I selected, but if I run mesh swap, it says warning may take a long time. In this case it won't. You'll see that it has converted these into actual individual geometry meshes, then also had the geometry applied. Just a little insight on how this is implemented. It's actually importing this from a library file and then replacing each instance of the old grass with the new. So you would notice, for example, it has a duplicate material name. So again, maybe we want to consolidate materials. That would fix it. So now it's all back to one material again, which is great. And then it has this animation, which may be quite nice. Just for convenience or performance, I'm going to disable the solidify, displacement, and all this jazz just so it runs a bit faster. But yeah, I mean, it's good to know that those modifiers are there. You could actually just outright delete them. Yep, so that's sort of mesh swapping. Obviously, it would also work on things like flowers and so forth, or even the sugarcane. It should work. But yeah, so jumping from there into mob spawning. So in the last version of MCprep, I kind of collapsed the skin swapper. We moved to a structure where it actually uses a UI list. So in 3.0.0, it introduced this. Down the road, I'm hoping there will be icons to be very nice, but at least in the meantime, this is pretty functional. It allows you to search for things, so I can easily find what I'm looking for. And it also doesn't take up a very long, there's a scroll bar, which I think is convenient. But the functionality is essentially the same. So for example, if I want to go to my player mobs and I want to just add in my generic player here, I just press spawn player. It gives me some options. This is new of this version. Last time this only would appear in the redo last menu, but here I can, if I accidentally click the wrong one, I could select a different mob. I can select how it adds it to the scene. Most often you'll probably be using cursor, and then whether I want to library link it or if I want to clear the pose. So if I do this, it would add my character here. You note that it now also will update for the engine. So right now if I go into render mode here, lighting aside, I don't really have global illumination on, obviously, but here it works. It will use Blender materials, but if I had switched to cycles, and then let's say I just did this again, so again I'll kind of use the cursor here. Oop, that's annoying. So that's a bug, in progress bug. What do I actually say? Thought I actually fixed that situation. Let me just add this guy instead. So if I spawn an Alex rig, and then if I go into render mode, you would actually find that it did auto update. It basically will auto apply MCprep materials, so you see that it fixed on importing the material for Alex here. Obviously the rest of the scene hasn't been fixed because I didn't run it there, but if I then switch back to Blender internal, again the materials will be wrong here because we haven't switched it back. But again, I could just do that like normal, and then you would see that Alex would then have the right materials. Yep, so that's how that kind of functions. The other thing I added was these little two icons here, so to explain what those are. The first one, the little arrow, that's supposed to be a convenience. So for quickly adding a mob into the scene. So the reason I did this was, this button down here, it forces this UI pop-up to appear, so you're very conscious about whether you're library linking or not. Before that was maybe not as clear, or it'd only appear in the redo last menu. So I've now library linked in this character, and it's auto proxied it, so it is referencing from an external file. And it will have some of the options in the redo last menu over here. But it's nice now that it actually forces you to select that here. But say if you're adding a lot of things very, very quickly, for example, maybe you want to have let me just go to all mobs, and let's say we want to put in a bat, for example, and we just want to have a bunch of bats in our scene. So you could actually just click this arrow. It's actually a button, and then you then have this bat here, and I could move this bat around. Can't remember so I selected clear pose, so it cleared any animation that was on it. But if I exit out of this and did this again, I should still have these redo last options, so I could disable clear pose, and then now this bat, which is all the way over here, if I just move it back over here, it would have some default animation or pose associated with it. So I could do that for other things, like a chicken. Let's just say if we want to have a bunch of chickens in the scene, we can do that. You can see it uses the last used options. I added a blaze there. So obviously you can select anything that has the arrow. You don't have to have it selected or highlighted. But this allows you to still very quickly add things into the scene if you want, or if you want the more control of getting this pop up to make sure, yes, I want it to be library linked or not, and auto proxy, then you can do that sort of thing. So the last kind of feature, and this is where I think it probably is confusing. I'm trying to think what a better way to do this is. But these little radio heads, this has to do with skin swapping actually. So if I go to my player mobs, let's say that I want to make this player the default or a active rig for skin swapping, you'll see that once I click on it, I will have this little highlight there, and it will say skin swap. And it's separate from the selected rig in this mode down here. So it's meant to be like a separate type of selection. So let me get into what that actually means by going into the skin swapping area. So this, again, this was a new feature in the most recent version of MCprep. Skin swapping in general is a convenient way to quickly apply different skins to your rigs. And it comes with a couple out of the box, just really pretty much random ones. It allows you to easily add others. So the idea here is if you select a rig or its armature or any individual material on it, and you have a skin selected, you can just click apply skin and it will apply the skin to your character. So it looks like it didn't do anything. If I actually went to edit mode, or so not edit mode, but render mode, you would see that it updated the rig in render mode. If you actually wanted to update how it looks in the 3D view with this, let me actually hide some of these things. If you want to see how it looked in the 3D view with the updated skin as well, then all you have to do is essentially select all the objects that you want to have be updated with the new skin. So now if I press apply Alex, again, because I had the geometry selected, it also applies it to the skin as well. So again, now you can see that's been updated there. I could apply a different skin, of course. I could do this red shirt. So that works. And the way it does, it just applies the texture to the material that's found. Apply you to be red skin as well. Oop, I guess I also changed the grass there. So you can see it does, it's pretty straightforward. It just replaces the texture whatever it's used. So I accidentally replaced the grass there. That's kind of funny. But just kind of demonstrates what that actually does. There's also the ability to, if you have a rig selected and you want to import a specific file, you can just press the up or the plus button, and then you can directly navigate to a skin file, and that will add it to this list. This is a persistent list. It's actually, if you go to this folder, press this, you'll see that these are physical files that are kept in the resources of the add-on, or you could change it to your own location if you have your own skins elsewhere. I should have said that's also true for the spawning. Of course, it auto-generates the drop-down of categories based on folders and subfolders. But anyways, back here, you can do that also by selecting here. So I could select a file and apply it directly. So that's what this button does. So if I navigate to a file, which I don't really have any handy, actually I guess I do. If I did that, ignore the fact that I'm going to some project folders now, super secret. I have other rigs. I have other rig skins somewhere. Pretty sure. Here we go. So if I selected this random skin, I don't even know what this looks like. If I press swap skin, you'll see if I actually selected, well, I can see it changed the face, but I only had the face selected. So if I actually did that again, it imported. If I do that again, you'll see that it then, again, I keep selecting other stuff in the scene, but it's now applied this rig, or this skin here. So I guess that function doesn't specifically import it into here, which I figured was convenient because you're trying to, maybe if you have it in a specific file location, you probably want to keep that relative path. So like this material with this new image, it references that original path that we just saw instead of importing to this list. But if I wanted to add it to this list, then I could do it here, and now it does appear here. And so if I did it this time with the apply skin, you would notice this path it changed to be this local one. You also have the ability to, I'm just going to get rid of these things. Obviously, you can also, this again was in the last version, skin from username. So if I want to do like Captain Sparkles or something and press OK, then what actually happened is it just downloaded the skin and applied it to this rig. So again, it's very basic. This particular rig, for example, is set up to be with 1.8 skins. So if you chose or selected or downloaded a file that was a older version of skin that has, if you look at this is a square image, but if the old versions were just like this top half essentially, it would appear stretched, it wouldn't look right. So it's pretty straightforward like that. I think that makes it flexible with other rigs because I'm not making assumptions on how the rigs have their skin layouts or anything. I'm assuming they're kind of using the standard format. And so if you had an old version of a skin, which to that point, for example, the VMX Comics rig does use the old version. So if I added that here, oop, I put the cursor there, if I skin swap this guy with any of these, it would look off because it doesn't look right. But that's because this layout of the body, you can see it's stretched high because it's the old version of the skin. So you'd have to like scale it down, move it up, and then that would start to look correct. But anyway, so that's just a note about understanding how it just applies that. So where this radio head button comes in, and again, this is where the UI is maybe confusing. Maybe instead I can find a different way of doing it. But essentially, the idea is that maybe you have a consistent rig that you always use. Like for example, you have this player, which is just a generic player that where do you go? I guess it went down there. Let me just open up a new file to clear everything out a little bit. So if I had a generic player and then I just knew I was going to be using that to add it into my scene a lot, so this player, so make that active. The idea is that this is like set up to be a very generic texture. Let me go back to Blender Render and fix all the materials. Prep. And that should work. All right. I'm sorry, I should have actually probably kept that scene. Let me just open up some lighting so we can see things. Yeah, so the idea is that it would, you're able to very quickly add both a rig and a specific skin. So a classic example of this is if I actually do point this to that path, again, I'm selecting the skin swapper MC skin path here. If I point that to that other folder that we were looking at before with all of these, and I press accept, all of these have now been loaded in. And with my player rig as the active one, I can essentially just select one of these. And again, I should make sure I understand what that error is. It's quite annoying. But essentially, I think it's actually to do with the armature being wrong, or trying to reuse the same armature on importing. But if that's obviously not going to work for me. Let's try Alex. Do Alex for a second. If I press this skin and I have Alex added, it will simultaneously import Alex as well as apply the skin. So now if I go into the rendered mode, you can see it's applied this skin immediately. And if I went into improve UI, you would see that in the 3D view as well. Obviously, this, I guess, was a skin that wasn't made to have 3D eyes, so it still has like the face in front of it, so it looks a bit weird with this model. So maybe you would have a different model that you have selected down here as active that doesn't have 3D faces, for example. I know like the player rig actually does have that. You just delete the model with the eyes. And the idea is, if this was actually working right, I could just very easily spawn in. Yeah, so something's going off here. I guess that's something that I will look in. I don't know, maybe it works for one of your installs, but the idea is that I could have pressed that button and it would instantly spawn in another character with the new skin that I had selected there. It looks like it's an issue with importing actually. But if I apply the skin, then we could see, yeah, that works there. I'm not sure why this blonde friend of ours has brown hair. It's kind of weird. Oh well. Yep, so that's kind of the workflow envisioned for skins here. Yeah, that's kind of an overview of what's in the tool right now. It's in MCprep. Obviously, lots of future plans, things like having more, like a workflow for setting up the environment, like setting up, I know that everyone does it differently, but there's some consistent things that may be convenient, such as adding ambient occlusion, environment lighting, a sun lamp, and clouds all in one go could be useful. Maybe there's even presets for times of day and stuff like that. Things that I'm thinking of down the line. But in terms of this workflow of sort of world importing, skin changing, and mob spawning, looking for feedback, looking to see if this still works and is stable. Things in the future obviously will be adding items from like a menu. I guess also it's worth saying that you should be able to test that you're able to also add in rigs from this Shift A menu over here. And it appears I'm missing my icon there. Again, things I'll work on. This is a dev, obviously. But if I add in my horse and then I say library link. I now have a library linked horse in my scene, which is all nice and great from the Shift A menu. So, yep. Again, I appreciate anyone's effort looking at this. I kind of doubt that anyone's watched it to this end at this point. It's kind of a long video, rambling. But if you are here and you are listening, I do appreciate it, and so does Mr. Horse right here. Yes, they very much so appreciate this. All right, I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much. And again, use the form in the description of the video for providing feedback. Much appreciated. Take care, everyone. Bye.